Thanks for joining us on Wellness Talk Radio. I'm Kris Costello, and today we're talking with Paul Williams, author of Gratitude and Trust, 6 Affirmations That Will Change Your Life. It's written with Tracey Jackson, and we are just so thrilled to have Paul on the show today. Paul, thanks for being here.
No, thanks for having us. I appreciate it, Kris.
So you lived in Santa Barbara for a while here, right next to Jonathan Winters and Robert Mitchum. So that must have been pretty interesting.
I had a couple of good buddies up there and all that, and moved to when my wife became pregnant with my son, our first child. We decided that the Hollywood Hills, with no sidewalks and cars flying around the corners of the hills, it was no place to raise a family. So we headed up to Santa Barbara, to Montecito. It was idyllic. The only thing that wasn't idyllic about the entire situation is that Daddy was a drunk, so that fabulous life with the acreage and the swimming pool and the beautiful clean air and the mountains and all was lacking in one thing: a responsible father and husband.
Oh, now that seems unfair to be in the dark years in Santa Barbara.
It's kind of insane, isn't it, to go to Santa Barbara and hide out in your bedroom or in your office and all. But in fact, I did, and I had a home in the Hollywood Hills at the same time, and I was always running off to that, and it was an interesting period of my life where I was just the peak of my career as a songwriter and as a performer. It was right at the top, but I was also at the solid beginnings of an addiction that was clearly getting out of control.
Yeah, I mean, you've had phenomenal success as a songwriter. Been on Johnny Carson 38 times, all those things that, just amazing things. And what do you think happened? How do you obviously at some point you went from maybe recreationally using these things to serious addiction?
I think that, first of all, we know that alcoholism is a disease. The John Lake study proved that in the 60s, that it is a disease, and it's a progressive disease, a chronic and potentially a fatal disease. So I don't know when I crossed the line from use to abuse to addiction, but somewhere in the 80s, the 70s were so productive for me and all. But I think that what is also really interesting is that in the midst of my greatest success, I kept reaching for the bottle, kept reaching for the drugs, medicating some kind of fear inside me that perhaps I just didn't really belong. You walk on that stage when you win a major award like 1977 with the Oscar. You're standing there, and people always say, "What is it like to have that moment?" And that moment is where you're standing and you're looking at a face full of iconic figures. There's Kirk Douglas, there's Burt Lancaster, there's Betty Davis, and the like. And I think there's some place deep inside me that was just kind of, you don't belong here, and when they find out, you're going to be in terrible trouble. And that's the truth that I think I medicated.
And that's a pretty common thing too, from what I've read.
Absolutely, I think it's pretty common, and I think that for me, the kind of sidestepping that feeling, using the alcohol and cocaine to sidestep or to camouflage, mask, that self-doubt and fear. I think before I used alcohol, I think I just simply avoided the feeling. I talk about some of this, and as we're working on the book, talking about these things with Tracey. I would kind of intellectualize them and then start writing about some things that happened to me. And when I was 13, my father was killed in a car wreck, and I was shipped off to live with an aunt and uncle. Actually, losing my entire family in that sense because I lost everything that was familiar to me, and I'm writing about it, kind of intellectualizing that. And the 3 words I kept hearing from Tracey were, "Go deeper, Paul. Go deeper. Get into this process. What does that feel like? What does it feel like to wake up in a stranger's bed like that?" And I think that the fact is that long before I drank alcoholically, I acted alcoholically, because in the midst of that really great sadness, I didn't feel it. I mean, I don't remember being sad as a kid. I was 5 years sober before I got to the point where I went, you know what? You had a Dickensian tragic childhood. Why weren't you sad at the moment? Why weren't you scared at the moment? I had already mastered the art of sidestepping the true emotion. And our authentic life is at the true emotion. You process it and you fully live life. that's what we've tried to do with the book. What I think was successfully done is created the 6 affirmations, which can lead you through a process to really deal with what you're feeling, whether it's fearful or celebratory, and move forward with your life.
Yeah, and some of the thing, some of it too. I mean, alcohol is often very genetic, and your dad had, died from alcoholism, right?
My father died in a car wreck, an alcohol-related wreck. I had 2 brothers, both recovering alcoholics. There is a genetic propensity for the disease, and I've always joked that I came from a long line of short drunks, but it's not really true because both my brother and my dad were 6-footers and all. So, but yeah, there is a definite genetic element, and I think there's, for so many alcoholics, it begins, as Tracey points out, a lot of the things we get in trouble with start out as great fun. It's fun to drink, it's fun to party, it's fun to meet somebody and run off and rent a hotel room. It's fun to order that big triple banana split sundae. But at a certain point, when you wake up to the cravings, when you find yourself at a place where you're starting the day with a glass of vodka in the shower, you're out of control with an addiction. And I think that the fact is that when it hits a hardcore addiction for an alcoholic or a drug addict, we know what to do. I mean, it's one of the gifts of if there is a gift of alcoholism, is that your problem essentially begins with that something needs to change, and it's probably me, is that I need to stop drinking. So it's pretty clear what my problem is at the beginnings of recovery, that I need to get the substances out of my life and all. It's interesting. The people that we've talked to that are in recovery, some people incidentally in radio as well, talking about their life in advanced recovery, reading the book. One of the lovely things we've heard from them is that as they've read the book, they went, this is awakening things in me that I'm not doing that I should be doing. I want to go back through the book again and use it as a workbook and really begin the process of really, really, weeding out the behavior that is just unacceptable. And that's a gift. That's a lovely gift to hear from somebody who's got, 20 years sobriety or 25 years sobriety, that says, in this book, Gratitude and Trust is the potential to make my life a little shinier.
And it's interesting, Paul, that first affirmation, it begins with me. It's such a simple statement and seems obvious, but it's really quite striking when you read it and you think about it.
Thank you. The exciting thing for me, because for 24 years people have been saying to me, why don't we have what you have? You guys in recovery, you go from just your lives being an absolute mess to the heights of success. You're happy, you're honest. Why don't we have something like that? And I've dealt with that for like 24 years. And finally, when Tracey said, why not create something with an entirely new voice based on those principles? And that had to be where it began. Something needs to change, and it's probably me. I think that one of the things that is very smart about that first affirmation is that the word probably is stuck in there. And that probably is in this case, I think, is symptomatic of it's there for that moment of willingness. You try on that something needs to change, and it's me. That's an absolute. Is this going to fit in my life? I don't know. But something needs to change, and it's probably me. Allows you the time to live with the thought, look at the information. You create a list of what you're doing in your life, and begin to move forward in the process. And that willingness is in that moment of waiting for it to actually be where I can discard the probably and go, yeah, something needs to change, and this time it's really me.
Right, and thinking about, what if it's not them? What if it's not my circumstances? What if it's how I'm thinking about it?
Sure. And the fact is that there are cases where you're going to need to change when the problem is not you. Something needs to change, and it's probably me. There's an entire section called Navigating the Nasties, which is a section of the book talking about where you're dealing with somebody that is just problematic in the relationship. It's a brother or a family member that is just, you go to that Thanksgiving dinner and you go through the same revolving door arguments every time, that they will not let you up for something you supposedly did. And the confrontation and the argument over the second helping of turkey is predictable. It's a revolving door, and it's become the relationship. It's become the language of the relationship. But you take that first affirmation and say something needs to change, and it's probably me. Because Louis, the brother that loves bringing this up again and again and again, probably isn't going to change. But you can change the way you relate to him. You can back away from that behavior and say, Louis, you know what, you're right. I was a little less attentive to other people's feelings at the times, and I'm sure that some of the things I did were probably very painful for you, and I'm sorry for that. And if Louis brings it up again, you say, yeah, Louis, Mom's painting, isn't this fantastic? Look at Mom's painting. So it's something that it's kind of a one-size-fits-all entryway into changing those parts of your life that just aren't fitting, that need to be improved.
At Wellness Talk Radio, we'd like to invite you to come check out our website at www.wellnesstalkradio.com. You can also find our ebooks on Amazon. Go to Amazon and type in Kris, Kris Costello. And so, Paul, how many years actually were you pretty much, addicted to alcohol and drugs?
I've always said that, you're an alcoholic when you misplace a decade. The 70s were incredibly productive for me. I had great success economically. I was constantly on television. I became better at showing off than at showing up. If you put down a couch and a camera, I would plop down there. I loved the way it felt to have all that attention. I became totally addicted to the attention, and it was at, I think, the expense of my craft and of my art. I think that my songwriting suffered. As my addiction to alcohol and cocaine increased, it outran that addiction to attention. Because I could have sat in that, I could have, tried to hang on to that for another 10 years. But one of the elements of alcoholism, part of the condition is a tendency to isolate. We isolate within our disease, and so the alcoholism and the cocaine use had me hiding out. You can't hide out and do Johnny Carson at the same time, so all that had to go away. But my use was by the late 70s. I was getting to the point where I could not really leave the house to go to work. My day was consumed with finding the dealer, making sure that I had my drugs for the day, and getting somebody else to go take the meetings for me because I couldn't show up. I was lost, and if anybody had told me that I could go years without drinking and using it, I would have laughed. I would have said, "Are you kidding? I can't go a day. I can't go a day. Can't be done."
So were you actually writing during those years?
Well, in the 80s, I wrote a lot of really bad songs that nobody recorded. And I think the only thing that got very much attention that I did during the 80s was Ishtar. I wrote the intentionally bad songs from Ishtar, and while it makes a good joke that, you were in a great condition to write bad songs, they actually were songs I was proud of. They were believably bad. But no, my productivity went out the window with my drug and alcohol use.
And at that time, one of your friends actually tried to, or did confront you, and I wonder, what was that like?
Kris Costello, who's my music director, has worked with me since 1977, and was one of the few people that had the courage to step up to the plate and say, you know what, I love you, I will worry about you. He didn't say I love you, he said, I'm worried about you. This deal with the drugs is totally out of hand. I just had to say something, and I said, you're fired, I fired him on the spot. I had others that worked with me and worked around me that would actually bring drugs into the house. And when I was supposedly trying to quit, would have a few days together. I had somebody that I worked with in management that brought drugs into my house and left them out for me to find. So, but Kaz tried to help, and I fired him. Of course, one of the great things that you get to do when you get sober is you get to put your life, you get to make amends, and I will learn from my mistakes and not defend them, and I will continue I will make right the wrongs that I've done is one of our affirmations, and in recovery it's the amends process, and I love the word amends, to mend what you have torn asunder. I was able to mend that relationship with Kris.
And that is one of the big affirmations in gratitude and trust. And why is that, I think, so difficult for a lot of people to do? To own our mistakes. I think that a lot of it is bad habit. A lot of it is that fear-based thinking that if we show the world who we really are, if I step up to you and I say, you know what, yeah, that was absolutely my fault. I was supposed to be there. I wasn't.
I was a failure as a friend, I was a failure as a coworker, whatever. That takes a certain courage that I think comes maybe just after a bit of a spiritual awakening. But it's interesting because it's a process that once you experience it, the relief you're pushing that old Sisyphus rock up the hill and again, trying to defend your behavior when you know it's wrong is exhausting. And you're burning daylight while you're doing that. But with the first few experiences of turning to somebody and saying, I was thinking about what happened in Lake Tahoe that 4th of July, and I totally lied to you about your car. I was the one. Nobody hit your car in the parking lot. I was drinking, and I bumped into that damn park bench that somebody put there, of all places, on the sidewalk, and own it and say what I did. And I'd like to make restitution for that right now. The relief that comes from a moment like that is its own reward, and you build on that, and you begin to find that as you make those amends, as you turn to the people that you've hurt, and you straighten those moments of your life out, you become lighter, and you all of a sudden Tracey has a wonderful thing she talks about like being emotional Sherpas, carrying all of our baggage around. You begin to cut loose some of that baggage. You become lighter. You have more time in your hands. You become more productive. And our capacity to then listen as opposed to constantly jabbering away, defending ourselves, we begin to grow, and our lives become better. And we have fun. The other thing is interesting. Tracey and I were talking this morning in the car that this entire process is also, I think that one of the things that we're hearing about the book is that people are talking about how funny parts of it are. There are some rather outrageous moments that we both share with the readers that I think that there's a good time to be had while you walk through this process.
Had you ever envisioned that you'd be writing a book like this?
I fell in love with recovery as soon when I experienced what it was like to wake up instead of coming to. I loved it. When I was suddenly, the beginnings for me was just being honest. My connection to people has always been my songs, and so it's always kind of one step removed. So there's a kind of an inherent loneliness or aloneness in that, and self-imposed, but it was there. When things got bad enough that I hit my knees and I said, I am terrified. I think I'm dying. I don't know what to do. I need help. Will you help me? People came forward in droves in the recovering community and said, you bet, we've been there. We know how that feels. We're there for you. And they reached out their hands and lifted me up. I absolutely fell in love with the whole process. I went to UCLA. I got my certification as a drug and alcohol counselor, and I entered what I refer to as the Polly Lama period of my life. That's where Tracey gets to Polly Lama, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was the most meaningful event of my life. That was the rainbow connection for me. That was the connection of suddenly feeling like I was part of the family of man.
A lot of people really struggle they have a loved one that is really battling addiction. And it's such a painful thing to go through. Like you said, you had your friend that confronted you way back when, and you responded by firing him. How do people that are close to someone that's struggling, what do they do? How do they cope?
Well, there's a chapter in the book called The Ones We Love, which deals with specifically dealing with somebody that you love that is caught up in an addiction of some sort. One of the first things that I tell people that always surprises them is that you have to take care of yourself. The alcoholic, if it is an alcoholic, the alcoholic is powerless over the alcohol. And as the friend, as the wife, as the mother, you essentially are powerless over the alcoholic. So if you're dealing with somebody that's a child, somebody that's in their teens and all, you have great power as far as legally what you can do. But at a certain point, if somebody is not willing to help themselves, then you have to be willing to set down some really strong boundaries. Stop paying their rent. Stop covering for them. Start. If you get up in the morning and the car is more on the lawn than it is in the street, lying to the neighbors about what happened, calling the boss and saying, Bill won't be in today. Yeah, he's got the flu. Yes, I know it's the third time he's had the flu, but being courageous enough to reflect the truth back to the person that needs help And again, setting solid boundaries for yourself where you say, at this point, I can't have a relationship with you until you begin to do something about what's killing you. Because I love you too much to win. In my case, it was a young lady who, before I finally hit that bottom and made a call for myself, my first exposure to the whole process was a young lady saying to me, I love you too much to watch you die, so I'm leaving. So I tried to get sober for her. It didn't work, but it was my first exposure to rehab, to trying for a sober life. You give somebody a great gift when you refuse to lie about the condition that they're living their life in. You give somebody a great gift when you turn to them and say, you're out of control, and I can't be a part of that. I want you well. I want you happy. And these are the things I'm willing to do, and these are the things I'm not willing to do.
And Paul, one of the affirmations is, you'll make, we were talking a little bit about, you'll make right the wrongs that you've done or
Exactly.
I've done. What most surprised you when you set out, when you started to do this?
I think one of the big surprises for me, the huge surprises for me, was how loving people would be right back to me when I brought something up. Again and again, there was a greater response to my having recognized the wrong that I'd done and trying to amend it than there was a clinging to any anger or resentment. I mean, there were people that were like, you'll run into people that will say, I don't want to hear it. There'll be people that will say, you know what, I didn't like you then, I don't like you now. Take a hike. That's a possibility. I haven't experienced that. What I did experience was one interesting situation with a gentleman who I worked with during my worst years on Ishtar for like a year and a half when I was just a mess. I missed meetings. I lied about where I was. I said I wasn't using when I was. I was a mess. And as he dropped me, we'd been in the recording studio, and as he was pulling up to my place, right before I got out of the car, I said, I just want to say I was probably awful to work with on Ishtar, and it must have been horrible for you, and I really apologize. I started to get out of the car, and he reached over and kind of touched my arm, pulled me back in, grabbed the door and shut it, and said, if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. What I was doing with him that I would never do again is I was kind of, doing a drive-by amends. I wasn't giving it the attention, the respect that something that is really kind of a holy moment deserves. You're taking this moment where you're turning to another human being. You're showing them that you're aware of who you've been. It is unacceptable, and I'm willing to look at that with you now and try to set this right and all. So I've had a couple moments like that in my life, but again, that relief of being able to look at the mistake, recognize it, own it, and make a proper amend the value is almost beyond measurement and instantaneously physical for me. Well, I find that when I make an amends, I get an almost immediate physical sense of release. I get lighter. I get silly. I get oh my God, it feels so good to have that wrong. It's like a little pain in the chest that's gone. That Pepto-Bismol really did wonders. Just being able to track down the person that I know that I owe the amends to, and do it. The other thing, this is something Tracey always points out, is you do it the day that something like that happens. It won't keep you awake 4 months later, or 4 years later, or a decade later. If on a daily basis, I will continue to examine my behavior on a daily basis, you will find, that when my head hits the pillow at night, if there's something that I've done during that day and I can get to it immediately the next day, set it straight, my life continues to improve. And the way my life is right now, it's just beyond anything I could have imagined 24 years ago.
Yeah, and you were recently awarded a Grammy for Album of the Year for your collaboration with Daft Punk. Beautiful song.
Isn't that amazing? I just turned 74, and to win Album of the Year, this was my third Grammy, but I'd never even been nominated for Album of the Year before. So this was an amazing gift, and the last 2-year process of from that moment when Tracey turned to me and I said that my choo-choo runs on the twin rails of gratitude and trust, and she said, there's a book there. And we began this journey of writing this book together. I couldn't have imagined what this was going to feel like to have something where we're beginning to get the response where people are saying, what you've done is remarkably enjoyable to participate in, to read and all. but more importantly, it's helping my life already. And that's the last one is I will live my life. The last affirmation is I will live my life in love and service, gratitude and trust. And there is nothing that feels better than doing the right thing. It's like, wellness radio. Let's have a moment with wellness radio. The concept of going to work on a daily basis at wellness radio and being able to give that to the rest of the world, you must have that same sense of love and service in what you're doing, and that sense of accomplishment. It's fantastic.
Oh, I really appreciate that, Paul. And I'm kind of laughing because actually, ever since I began this little quest, everyone in my life has become ill.
Really?
But I hope I'm I'm inspiring some others.
Well, the thing is that what's great is that you're in a great position to help them out of it now. You see, you get to be a warrior for the light and lead them right back to health again.
There you go. I hope so. But I did want to say, too, that song that you did get the Grammy Award Touch, it's just a beautiful song. Now, is that your voice on there?
That is me. I'm singing. I wrote two. I wrote Beyond and Touch. And then they asked me to sing Touch. And it's interesting because it's a song about I Remember Touch could very easily fit into one of the elements of addiction that we're seeing. Well, that we're seeing. I have to cop to it, as I'm sure Tracey would tell you. I have a serious attachment to my iPhone that goes past healthy, and I know that and all. And I think that there's a personal connection that with all the social media that's going on, with kids with their constant tweeting and the like, and the about 4 minutes worth of attention span that people are giving each other, the touch is something that I think this song kind of addresses that I remember touch. Feelings came with touch. A painter in my mind. That it's something that we're in danger of losing, and we need to address the things that separate us from our authentic selves, and the person that can really, really, really solidly feel an emotion and share it with another human being one-on-one.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly moving song. And,
thank you.
And I agree with you that, I want to ask you, in Gratitude and Trust, one of the great things about the book is it isn't just a book for people that have had struggles with alcohol or addictions. It's for everybody. I mean, there's something to take away for everybody. But I'm curious about, for you, what the most challenging affirmation was.
The most challenging affirmation for me, and you're right, incidentally, just to go back to your statement, the original title of the book was Recovery is Not Just for Addicts. We wanted to write a book that would take the concepts of recovery and the principles of recovery that had saved my life and so many lives and all, but really voice them in a new voice for people that were not dealing with a life-threatening addiction, but with life-limiting habits and all. So that's exactly we're finding a large response from the recovering community, but our initial audience was one step removed, was for that person that perhaps was reluctant to step into the full-tilt world of recovery, that they had something that they didn't feel was, that they wanted to work on, but they didn't want to step into a place where they would pull on the mantle of addict. That they had habits that were unproductive, that were interfering with their life, and they wanted something to deal with it. So the affirmations become a very kind of common language, easy way to move through these things and to set your life shiny side up. The most difficult, I don't think any of the affirmations I would describe as difficult, but I would say that the one that is probably the most powerful to me is I don't know how to do this, but something inside me does. It's something beyond my ability to explain or put into words why it is so powerful to me. It's something that I use all the time. I walk on stage, and I've been doing this for years and years and decades and all, but before I walk on stage, I get nervous. I get scared. Like, oh, my God, there's people out there. You peek out, maybe a small audience of really nice people that have come there to love me. But someplace inside me kind of goes, whoa, and I feel that thing rumbling in my tummy, and it's I've always said that it's the big amigo cleaning my windscreen, just getting me ready. But I walk out onto that stage and I feel absolutely at home. But to get from that place standing backstage and to a place where I can walk on that stage and be really glad to be there is that one affirmation. I don't know how to do this, but something inside me does. I don't know how to talk to Kris. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this, but something inside me does. And I think that it works for the big problems in lives and in our lives, and it works for the little ones. And I think that sense of having an inner ally, however you choose to describe him, I call him or her or it or whatever that energy is, I call my higher power the big amigo. I turn to the big amigo, and I immediately feel comforted. So that's the affirmation that is probably the one I use the most.
You're listening to Wellness Talk Radio. I'm Kris Costello, and we're talking with Paul Williams and Tracey Jackson, authors of Gratitude and Trust, 6 affirmations that will change your life. So, Paul, I've just got to ask you also, when you started out, I'm not sure, but did you have any idea where you would go with your songwriting and the acclaim that you've had over your lifetime?
No, it's funny. I was an out-of-work actor, and again, no was a gift. I didn't get the career that I wanted, and what I got was spectacular. Because when I failed as an actor, what I did was I took the emotions of what that felt like and sat down with a little guitar and taught myself some chords and started writing, and it was like a homecoming. I didn't think about the success. I didn't think about other people recording the songs. I know that something happened though when I was able to put down the words of what I was feeling, what it felt like. Then you play it for a young lady, and she kind of tilts her head to the side and goes, "Wow!" And that's a whole other level of excitement about the writing process. But I had no idea that and I've always said that if I was the only one who sang my songs, I'd be hot walking horses right now, but I had the most amazing voices singing my songs. And this morning, Tracey and I ran into George Benson, and who had recorded one of my songs. And just as we were standing talking, he started singing "We've Only Just Begun." And I got to tell you, I've never sounded. I've sung that song a million times, but I've never sung it with the absolute pure beauty of George Benson singing it, or Karen Carpenter.
Yeah, you're bringing back memories now. Paul, we just want to thank you so much for spending the time with us. And before we go, I'd like to ask you, if there's one thing that you really would like readers to take away from Gratitude and Trust, what would that be? Well,
that they are not alone, and whatever they're dealing with, that they're not alone, and that in this process of picking up this book, that just opening the page, consider that you're actually entering into a process, you're entering into a journey. Leave that the self-criticism behind. Leave the doubt about the process behind. Give yourself to it. And let it surprise you. Let the process of reading what we've written and reading, this amazing gift that I've been given that we've now revoiced. Allow yourself to be surprised by what it brings you. If you sit there and judge, if you're judging your distance to the shore with as a swimmer, and you can't really enjoy the swim if you're measuring your distance to the shore all the time. So give yourself to the swim, dive in, read the book, look at the process, try it, and enjoy the ride. Don't judge. See if you begin to sense a change in the way you feel about your life and what parts of it you want to change. And hopefully you'll be happily surprised at who you are and who you're going to be.
And I know we only covered a few of the affirmations. So, Paul and Tracey, where can people go to find out more about Gratitude and Trust and kind of get in touch?
www.gratitudeandtrust.com. We also is our website. We also individually tweet. Tracey is at Tracey Jackson 4. I am the letter M, Paul Williams. And we have our own Twitter handle for Gratitude and Trust, which is at Gratitude Trust. But check out the site, gratitudeandtrust.com. I am Paul Williams, at Tracey Jackson 4, and at Gratitude Trust. Find out where we're going, where we're going to be, what we're doing, and become part of the Gratitude and Trust family. We really appreciate you taking the time with us.
Oh, well, we are just so thrilled that you guys could be on the program today. And I hope you start a Facebook group because there's a lot of things I want to try, but I have no idea how to do.
You remind me that there is, in fact, a Facebook. There is the Gratitude and Trust Facebook page as well, so enjoy that.
Hallelujah. Okay. Well, thanks again, Paul.
My great pleasure. Thank you.
At Wellness Talk Radio, we'd like to invite you to come check out our website at www.wellnesstalkradio.com. You can also find our ebooks on Amazon. Go to Amazon and type in Kris, Kris Costello. Thanks for joining us on Wellness Talk Radio. I'm Kris Costello, and today we are talking with Tracey Jackson, author of Gratitude and Trust. Tracey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is really a treat.
First of all, it's just great to have you on the show, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. It's a really interesting book because a lot of it is about recovery, but it's not just recovery for addicts. So the book talks about affirmations, and you've got 6 of them that can change people's lives.
We do. Well, the book deals, as you know, with recovery. Our principle and our theme is really recovery is not just for addicts, because everyone's addicted to something, So and the great thing about this is everybody will find something in there that they can sort of point out being themselves. And while I didn't take drugs, and I have a drink. I'm not going to say that I'm like I will have a glass of wine at night, but I literally can't stop at one. I've never really been an addictive personality in terms of substance. But there was no question for 20 years I was pretty engrossed and addicted to negative thinking patterns. That's the jumping off point. That's what really always appealed to me about the program of recovery, which is people take responsibility for their behavior. And most people I know have a way of not taking responsibility for their behavior oftentimes. And I think we're all guilty of that at times in our life. I don't think there's any really poor behavior things that most of us aren't guilty at some time or another.
You're listening to Wellness Talk Radio. We're talking with Tracey Jackson, author of Gratitude and Trust, 6 Affirmations That Will Change Your Life. And that's written with Paul Williams and Tracey Jackson. I'm Kris Costello. You can check out our website at wellnesstalkradio.com. So, Tracey, one of the other things is I'll learn from my mistake and not defend them. And boy, mistakes, we're taught early on that, hey, mistakes aren't okay and avoid them. And actually, if you ever do research, the most successful people, they make a zillion mistakes along the way, and somehow they just, they get to the top. Well, why is it so important to look at our mistakes?
Mistakes are our greatest teachers. I think we're taught exactly as you say that mistakes are something to be ashamed of. Mistakes are something that we hide from. And one of the things I love about recovery is people in recovery own their mistakes, together, and they're taught to embrace those mistakes and learn from them and move forward from them. And we're taught at an early age that mistakes are a thing, that shows that we're not doing well or that we're not as good as someone else. But if I look at all the mistakes I've made in my life, either they've been gifts in some way or another, or if I look at them clearly and openly and not defensively, I try and say to myself, okay, what is my lesson in this? What is my lesson in this? And, if you just use the thing you road rage these days, everybody's in a rush. All the freeways are jammed. People drive around parking lots and take someone's space and they swear at the other person. There's all this kind of anger and hostility, and there's not enough time and there's not enough space. So let's say you're going to an appointment and you're not great with time management. You're always late. So you're 20 minutes late. Someone takes your parking place. Then you yell and chew out that person. Then you're angry at the guy in the elevator. You're angry at the girl that's just. As opposed to saying, okay, let me learn from this. Maybe if I got up 20 minutes earlier and I had my act together and my house wasn't a total mess and I had gas in the car, I wouldn't find myself late and I wouldn't find myself behind the 8 ball and I wouldn't find myself then really angry at everyone around me for something I should have taken care of early that morning. That's a very small example, but it's something that we see all the time. These things start with us. You can make bigger mistakes in partners. You learn from people along the way to make mistakes. I don't think there's anyone that's listening to this who hasn't made the wrong love choice at one time in their life. That's how you learn to be the right person. But But you got to look at what was wrong with that relationship. What's that relationship teach me about myself? What I need from someone else? What I can give to someone else? Character traits I like, character traits that I just can't live with. Everything we know, everything we experience is, you look at where we've messed up along the way. That's a guideline as to how we do better tomorrow. So I think one should embrace it and sit down and write down, I made this big mistake today, and what is my lesson in that? And when I stop myself and I don't defend my behavior, and I look at it honestly, I do say, Tracy, what can I learn from this? What is my lesson here? Sometimes the lesson doesn't come right away. Sometimes you have to sit and be patient. You're not always going to get everything the second you ask for it, certainly. But I think the lesson will come to you and the knowledge will come to you if you quietly oftentimes wait for it.
And so, Tracy, I'm curious, in gratitude and trust, out of the affirmations, what was the most challenging one for you to deal with personally?
I would have to say, that's a good question, because I never thought about being challenging. People usually ask which one I like the best. I think that sometimes for me, trust will cause a problem. I've learned to trust. I've had to teach myself to learn to trust. Gratitude comes easily to me. Sometimes I'm not trusting of people. Sometimes I'm not trusting of situations. And that stems back to my childhood. I think most people's subconscious issues do stem back to their childhood. You very seldom find someone who says, at 40 years old, someone insulted me, and ever since then I've had this issue. I think most of it stems back to when we were young and the things we absorbed and saw around us or how we were treated. So I don't trust as easily as many people, and I've had to learn to trust. That's probably been my biggest challenge. I trust myself oddly. I trust myself quite well, usually. But I don't trust other people as much as I trust myself. And that's something I've had to learn to do, is put my faith in other people in a bigger way.
Is it a matter of figuring out who to trust?
Yeah, I think, my father left when I was very young, and has been a very inconsistent figure. And I think when that happens to you at a young age, you're not quite sure who you can trust in the world. Because I think we all think we're supposed to be able to trust our parents. Certainly, that's for the first early years, that's the only people you can trust. So if you can't trust them, and I've never felt that I could actually trust my father, that leaves a place in you where trust is, there's a question behind without, after the word trust. Who can I trust? If this person who's supposed to love me unconditionally can't, doesn't, won't, whatever the situation may be, then trust becomes much more of an issue. And it's something you overcome as you go through life, and I have been able to overcome it. But I would be lying to you if I said, and I'm not so far from a perfect person, this is funny, that there weren't days when my fallback position to go to is, I can't trust someone. It will turn out like it did with Dad. That's what I will hear or see in the situation. It's probably totally unrelated. It's so ingrained in me on a certain level that I can't quite escape it. But then I'll stop myself and I'll say, okay, this is not your father. You are not 4 years old. You are a 56-year-old grown woman. This is an entirely different situation. And I talk myself down off that ledge of not trusting. But I've had to learn how to do it, and it's taken me 56 years. So it doesn't happen overnight. But the book is a great place to start.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting with the one of the affirmations, I don't know how to do this, but something inside me does. And I think that kind of rings true for getting through those kinds of issues too, right? I mean, I know I've experienced that in my own life.
Yeah, well, that's our spiritual step, certainly. I don't know how to do this, but something inside me does. And that step can really be, step affirmation, that can be interpreted by anyone probably in any way they want. For us, it means just take it out of you. We don't care what you believe in, because people often have a hard time with spirituality. Some people have a hard time with God, with higher power. That's just something that they really want to steer clear of for their own personal reasons, which I'm totally non-judgmental about. Whatever people want to believe or not believe is none of my business. And I don't want anyone judging what I believe or don't believe. But what we'd like is for people just to have a little trust and faith in something. Even if it's the ocean, if it's the mountains, if it's their dog, if it's coffee, it doesn't really matter. If it's whatever gets you through the day, just sometimes have to hand it over, because we often burden ourselves and we try and manipulate things and we think we know what's best for us. And when sometimes what's required in life is to just hand it over. I mean, I have something I call a hand it over box. And if I have a big problem that I'm just torturing myself with, I'll write down, please help me out with this. And I'll write down the problem and I zip it up and I put it in the box. And then the only time I'm allowed to think about that problem is if I take it out of the box consciously and stare at it, then I have to give the box back. I have to give the problem back. The problem has to be taken away from me. I have to hand it over. Sometimes that's what's required. It's not necessarily this the big guy in the sky. It's just I'm handing it over to the powers that be, whoever they may be, wherever they may be, to help me through this situation. I don't have what it takes to do it. I need to have faith in something and trust in something. And those are the big life issues, which we will all face, and we all do face. Health issues, death issues. You know, life has a lot of problems. And I think there's this whole happiness movement that we're all going to be eternally smiley-faced and happy 24/7, which we also don't. We don't sell that. It's very important, I think, to look at your problems and accept your problems and not run away from them. If you wake up and there's something to be sad about, you should embrace that sadness. You should just feel that sadness, understand where it's coming from, and understand it will pass. But by pushing problems away and pushing feelings of discomfort away, that's where a lot of addiction comes from. We're medicating ourselves, or we're removing those feelings from ourselves by doing something that distracts us and makes us feel good. But we should not medicate ourselves away from our feelings. Our feelings are truth. Feelings are truth. I think that is absolutely paramount. Feelings are truth. So if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling upset, if you're feeling hurt, look at that feeling. Now, don't go to the mall and buy a dress and pretend it doesn't exist. Look at what's going on in your life. Don't have just 3 glasses of Chardonnay and pretend it doesn't exist. There's information in those feelings. And by embracing them and getting through them, you come out the other side. By medicating them or pushing them away, by distracting yourself through any number of pleasure stimulators, you're simply procrastinating dealing with what's really bothering you. So I've learned if I'm sad, I'm sad. And I'll be sad, and I know I'll get over it. And at that point, it doesn't have the power over you. I think that's a very important lesson in life.
At Wellness Talk Radio, we'd like to invite you to come check out our website at www.wellnesstalkradio.com. You can also find our ebooks on Amazon. Go to Amazon and type in Kris, K-R-I-S, Costello. It is. And Tracey, one of the things you mentioned in Gratitude and Trust is that you had certain ideas and expectations of what you want to be doing with your life. I mean, obviously, you've been a very successful writer and had lots of career success, but how do the things you thought you were going to do differ from what you've actually done?
Well, if you asked me 10 years ago if I thought I was going to be writing a book like this at this stage of my life, I probably would have laughed at you. I think that this has been a great gift and a great surprise to get to do this with Paul, who was my childhood idol, and to write this book, which has been just such a learning experience and a growth experience, and I think it's helping people. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I think the biggest surprise I had in my life, work-wise, when I was young, I thought I would be an actress, and then I knew that wasn't going to work by the time I was 30, so I adjusted and I started writing. I learned a lot of that from my mother, who's been a good role model in teaching me how to change gears and reinvent herself all through her life. You know, I think that we go into life oftentimes thinking we're going to have one career or do one thing or one relationship, and when that doesn't work out, we have a very hard time accepting that life moves on. That this relationship may not work forever, this career may not work forever. I probably thought one of the biggest things that was a stumbling block for me was when I was turning 50, and my screenwriting career that had been really, really good for 20 years started to drift away. And it wasn't because of anything I did. It was just merely circumstances. It was the industry changed. I was getting older. I was a comedy writer. The films that probably should have made tons of money, a couple of them didn't make tons of money, and that affected the way I was perceived. And I realized that I had to make a career change. And I had about 6 months of real dark nights of the soul where I'd go into my office, just put my head on my desk and cry. But out of that came a book I wrote called Between a Rock and a Hot Place, My 50 is Not the New 30. And that was a gift, that career shift, that no from the universe. No, you're not going to be a screenwriter forever. I thought I would be, get to probably 70 and get to write funny movies and be a funny girl and do what I've been doing my whole life. And I didn't. But, Paul likes say no is a gift. And that no was a gift. And I remember I wrote on my bulletin board in my office where I'd written all my movies. I had a big whiteboard where I used to break down my screenplays, and I wrote the Robert Lowell quote, which I love, "Fate loves the fearless," and a quote from Virginia Woolf, which is, "Arrange the pieces that are put in front of you." And I think a lot of people, when they get in their 40s and 50s, all of a sudden maybe their career isn't what it was, and they have to make choices, which almost all of us will have to do. You have to be agile enough, and you have to be flexible enough to learn it may be time to make a change, and what is that change? And sometimes be patient for the knowledge of what that change is, or try different things until something works. But that certainly was a period for me of great information. And now when I look at it, and people will say to me, "Oh, don't you wish you were writing movies?" Because people think writing movies is a very glamorous, fabulous thing to do, which it can be in moments, and it can be agonizing and torturous with others. I think there's nothing in the world I would rather be doing than what I'm doing today. And I could have never predicted that. I could have never thought that. I never dreamt, in my life that I would be doing what I do today. And it's one of the great periods in my life. So life surprises you. And you have to remain open to those moments and to those gifts that come from somewhere else, and say, they nudge you in a direction and say, go there, turn right. If you turn right and go behind that door, you're going to find something pretty wonderful. And that's trust then, right? You got to go to the place of trust. There is something there that's good for you.
That's a wonderful quote. Arrange the pieces that are put in front of you.
Isn't that? Yeah, I love that quote. And so a lot of women, and I lectured a lot of women who get to be in their 50s, and they get confused because a lot of people have given up their careers, or careers changes. There is ageism in the workforce, especially if you're a woman. I do believe these things exist. And so I say to them, arrange the pieces that are put in front of you. Follow your passion. Make the next 30 years count. Do something. And you can. You can. You just got to do it. And my mother's 86 years old, and she's just taken up painting. I think that's just amazing. She goes to painting classes 3 times a week at Santa Barbara City College, and she loves it at 86, giving her a whole new thing to do. There's always something new to do, as long as you stay healthy and curious and agile.
What a great attitude, and what a great attitude that she's passed on to you with the reinvention. I mean, that's so critical in life, I think. I think it's essential, and especially now, the way the world works. I mean, the world that exists today, certainly in the workforce, is not the world that I grew up in, or my grandparents lived in, or probably even my parents lived in. I think it's a very different world, and people do many things now, and they do many things over the course of a life. And I think that's always a shock to people. I don't think they're prepared for that. And now that we live longer, healthier, people used to retire at 60, 62, and they'd go off and play golf. Well, now people are really vibrant until they're in their 80s for a long time, and they just don't want to be sitting on a rocking chair. They need to do something. So they have to find something to do. And that's where they have to arrange the pieces that are put in front of them. And so, Tracey, I also want to just ask you, with gratitude and trust, there's a ton of information in there about just reinventing your life and getting through difficult times. But I know there must be something in there that you think, that you'd really want people to take away from reading that. And what really stands out for you? I think one of the big lessons that I like people to take away, and I don't know if it's ever actually verbalized in the book in these words. It's something that I tell my children all the time, and I find some of the best lessons I have, the lessons that I do tell my children, is it's so much better to be loved than be right. And I think that people so desperately want to be right in their convictions, right in the choices they've made. It gets back to what you talked about earlier with them being stuck. And in standing firmly on the land of right, we often push love away and opportunity away. And so when you get into that place, you ask yourself, do I want to be loved? Do I want to live in a life full of love, or do I want to be right? And that goes back to something needs to change, and it's probably me, how I look at the world, how I engage the world. Does it need it all to be my way, the way I've always thought it to be, very rigidly? Or am I flexible? Is love more important than being acknowledged for how smart I am, or what good choices I've made, or how everything I think is the right thing? I think that's a huge thing. I think it's a huge thing. Well, Tracey, we want to thank you so much for joining us on Wellness Talk Radio today. And I know people are going to you're on a big book tour right now, and I know they'll be looking for you and Paul Williams. Once again, just thank you for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a great discussion.
At Wellness Talk Radio, we'd like to invite you to come check out our website at www.wellnesstalkradio.com. You can also find our ebooks on Amazon. Go to Amazon and type in Kris, K-R-I-S, Costello. Hope you have a great week.